Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Friday evening's Conversations with Kate. And I am very excited tonight because this is a real night for learning more about someone special who's part of the congregation here at St. James, and also some learning more about a very famous African-American architect, Paul Williams. But first, I want to introduce you to St. James member, Royal Kennedy Rodgers. And hello, Royal.
Hi, everyone.
Now,
I'm
are
so
we
about this interview?
Me too. Are you here in Los Angeles right now?
Yes, I am.
I know that you and your husband, Jonathan, sometimes you're in San Francisco, LA, East Coast.
I know. It's confusing. We have to figure out one place.
Right. I want to start by finding out a little bit about how you found your way to St. James, because I think there's an interesting connection people will be glad to hear about. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm from Chicago. I was born in Chicago, and my parents grew up in Chicago. During my childhood, my family moved around the country because my father was an Air Force pilot, and we went from base to base. And we lived also overseas in Tokyo for a time. And it happens that my husband was also an Air Force brat, as they call us. And he moved around a lot as well. And my husband and I have worked in television for all of our careers, and we've been back and forth recently between Washington, D.C. and LA. And I guess about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer, I was in Washington, where our official residence is, working on the documentary, writing the script for the Paul Williams documentary, and John visiting out here. And I don't know what brought him to St. James. Maybe it's because he was kind of looking around at Episcopal churches, and maybe it's because it's a gorgeous building. But he went one Sunday.
Could have been the Holy Spirit too.
Yes, that's it. That's what guided him.
Gorgeous building plus Holy Spirit.
And he happened to see Ingrid Finley Scott's name, I think, in the program. I'm not sure. She's so prominent, he could have seen it, anywhere. Maybe she was reading the lessons or was an usher that day.
Yeah.
She's so active. And later he said, because he recognized the name Finley, and he said, Royal, I think one of your family friends goes to this parish. And it turned out it was, because my father's, one of his closest friends growing up was Clarence. His nickname was Red. Finley.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, because I think he had red hair when he was younger. Anyway, he was Ingrid's father. And when I came to visit, I reunited with Ingrid. But yes, Ingrid's
and
father.
What about isn't there a Tuskegee Airman?
Yes, they were both Tuskegee Airmen. They not only grew up together in Chicago, they were Tuskegee Airmen together. I think they were in the same class of new flyers of airmen recruits.
Amazing connection.
So it is amazing. I think I hadn't seen Ingrid since we were children, and it was a wonderful.
Well, come to St. James, you'll definitely see Ingrid and Scott. And so you grew up all over the place, and then you were in college. It was 1969, right? And the world was really at one of those sort of hinge points, like the one that we're at now. So tell us about you in 1969.
Some people are comparing today and the movement for all kinds of movements for social justice with the late 60s. and in good ways and bad ways. Then it was the fight against the war in Vietnam, the civil rights movement. And of course, we know that in 1968, both Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were assassinated within months of each other. And the TV networks, there were only three then.
ABC, that's right. There were only three. That's crazy.
Realized that they had no diversity, and they began to address it. Everyone you saw on the air in news was a white male, and they decided they wanted to do something. So they got together with the Ford Foundation and the Columbia University School of Journalism, and decided they were going to set up a program to teach people who already did have a little bit of a career in journalism or an interest in journalism or kind of a talent for writing. You had to take a writing test. I remember that, to get in. And they had this summer rush program to train journalists to go on TV. And there was a process, an application process, a writing test, and it lasted for several years. I went through it. My husband went through it. My co-director, producer, Kathy McCampbell Vance, went through it. And many, many people we know or knew, we're both semi-retired in the broadcast industry, got into television through that program.
But I'm imagining that not only did they want diversity and on-camera talent, but also you could probably go into parts of the city to cover stories in a whole different way.
Right. That was true. They realized that when they wanted to cover the African American community, it would be that the community would be incensed by sending yet another white man, to put a mic out there. And so they realized that they needed people to go into these communities who were from these communities. And so it gave an opportunity to scores and scores of us. I think that in the time that the program was active, I think I shouldn't say it, but maybe hundreds of people went through it and got into.
I wonder if Gwen Ifill was part of that.
It's entirely possible. Although I do know, I knew Gwen, and a little, but I knew she came from the New York Times because my sister knew her at the New York Times.
Oh, all right.
Did get into.
She was in print journalism then. Mm-hmm.
She was in print journalism. Gwen actually started in print journalism.
All right. So there you are with your high level crash course there at Columbia, and then over the years you were with NBC in New Orleans and Cleveland and Chicago, and then ABC News in LA and PBS in Chicago. What a career! And I probably left out some cities. That's just what I know.
That's exactly accurate.
Wow.
It was you can't even, I can't even say how lucky I was. I had, and as you can imagine, I had so many pinch me moments.
Oh my goodness.
Where I just said, I don't believe I'm here. I don't believe how lucky I am. It was an incredible experience.
Yeah. And nowadays, you're in this sort of producer, writer, director phase of your career, it seems like.
Well, I'll tell you, this was another kind of coincidence, how I came upon the Paul Williams and this documentary. I was one of those people who'd never heard of Paul Williams. Even though we had lived in, LA, I knew his work. And my husband, Jonathan, and I were living in Chicago, and he got a call from Karen Hudson, Paul Williams' granddaughter.
Oh yeah.
She and her brother knew my husband from college, and
Wow.
I've just written a book on my grandfather. I'm going around the country promoting it, and we said, great, and I'm coming to Chicago, and I said, we'll have a party for you, a book signing party. So we did. She sent the books in advance. When I opened, the cartons of books and saw her book and what he had done, it was her first book, a gorgeous, gorgeous book. I could not believe that I had never heard of this man.
I know. Let's put a photo up now of him, just so that everyone can see what he looked like. A very handsome and stylish and sophisticated
right.
man. This is looks like a picture of a couple of pictures here. One of Paul Williams with a group of architects. This is the one where there's a bunch of them and they're all about to build
LAX.
LAX. There he is. There he is, right there, sitting at his desk, and what an amazing person. So let's backtrack a little to hear a little bit about how he got his start. What I know for sure is that he was an orphan by the age of 4.
One of the things that we my co-producer and I, and a lot of people who, like his grandson and daughter, say that you wouldn't believe his story if
couldn't make it up. Yeah.
It's like something out of a Hollywood screenplay, because it was a roller coaster life. He was born in LA, and in 1896, and by the time he was 4 years old, both his parents had died, and he was an orphan. He was taken in by a foster family, a family from the church, because they have official adoptions then, especially among African Americans. So their church community stepped forward. He had an older brother. They were adopted or taken in by 2 different families.
But he got I think he got a nice mom out of the deal, didn't he?
He did. And his granddaughter, Karen Hudson, says that she was a strict foster mother, but she always encouraged him. She taught him that he could do anything he wanted to do. And so that gave him the foundation. He was a drawer and an artist early. He was the class artist. And then, he went to, by the time he got to high school, he was interested in architecture. And one of the most famous stories about him was he expressed this to, he went to Cal Polytechnic High School, which was one of the elite high schools then. And a teacher or a counselor, whoever he expressed these, dreams to, said, whoever heard of a Negro architect? That's impossible. You should be a doctor or a lawyer. You'll never make it in architecture because your community, that's the African American community, can't afford you, and the white community won't hire you. And he proved that wrong.
Well, it sounds like I think some people have this ability to just burn discouragement as fuel.
Right. Boy, what a good expression. That's perfect, because that's exactly what he did.
Yeah. But I also think that I watched your film, and so now I think I know more than I know, but it doesn't sound like he harbored the kind of anger that no one could blame him for the constant mistreatment and disrespect that he experienced. He seemed to have this ability to keep translating it into well, as he talked about in the film, tricking people
Yeah,
into.
you're right. He didn't express anger, and in fact, Karen and Paul, his grandchildren, say that their mother and their aunt. He had two daughters, and he never brought his work home with him. The family never knew what he went through at work or on construction sites or in trying to get various jobs. He just didn't.
There's that famous story that you told me when I first met you about how he sketched for clients.
Yes.
Can you tell that amazing story?
That's probably the most famous story about Paul Williams. He, traditional mode or effect to show ideas to a client is they're seated on the same side of the table, and the architect will lean over the client showing, why don't we do this, or what do you think of that? And he just knew that, he just knew that probably wouldn't go over. So
you mean with white clients?
White clients, because almost all clients were white. Not all of them, but so white clients would be uncomfortable if he got too close to them. So he taught himself to draw upside down, and it became his calling card. And what distinguished him. He became famous for it. And his granddaughter said that years later, when people would come in the office and say, "Oh, we'll sit right next to you, but will you do that drawing upside down?" We heard about that. We want to see it.
My goodness, that is amazing. I just want to quickly welcome some people to the chat. I see that our friend Reverend Betsy Anderson is in the chat tonight, and also Jim Stewart, not the movie star, but he's definitely a star to us at St. James. And also wonderful Comfort Ogbonamiri is here, a woman of tremendous style. So they may be chatting to us in a minute. I wonder if we could start to look at some photographs of some of Paul Williams' work, just to get an idea of what it was like. So Justin, if you could bring us up some photos of his work. He helped with LAX. This photo here, they're building the Compton.
Right. That's a construction site photo. And it's the Compton
Imperial Housing Project I have in my notes.
Complex. And, I do want to say this, that even though he's called Architect of the Stars and he worked with some of the biggest stars in Hollywood, he did all kinds of work, and he did work for every level of income. He did not only public housing, schools, churches. He did the 28th YMCA, Street YMCA, that was for African-American boys at that time. And
First AME Church, that's a famous one.
Church, of course. Yeah. So he did many.
I read somewhere that in your press pack about how he also was really committed to making affordable single family homes.
Right. He, in fact, after World War II, he came out with 2 books of housing plans for small houses for the returning GIs, addressing the housing shortage. They were starter homes. Yeah.
Because I think that there's just so much dignity in being able to have your own beautiful home.
Right. And
so I know that there are all these famous buildings that he did throughout the city. And I think he also did residential homes for the stars and for others. Who are some famous stars that he made houses for?
Well, in the early days, Lon Chaney was one of his first. Lon Chaney may have been his first Hollywood client.
Lon Chaney Sr.
Lon Chaney Sr. That's right. I forgot about Lon Chaney Jr.
Lon Chaney Jr. was the Wolfman, I think, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, there is a Lon Chaney Jr.
Yeah.
Yes, the Lon Chaney hired him to do a weekend house, and then hired him to design a main house in Beverly Hills. The sad thing is that he caught a cold or something on a movie set and got very sick and died, and never moved into the house. But we are fortunate. Yeah, we visited that house.
That one's still around though, huh? And then he did, I know that there's one that doesn't exist anymore, but didn't he build or design a really swanky one for Frank Sinatra?
Oh, that is a true shame. Yes, a very swanky house for Frank Sinatra. And that house is significant for so many reasons. And it's hard to believe it couldn't be saved by the preservationists.
It's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling. First of all, the first thing is it was one of his true modernist houses. He did a lot of traditional houses. It was extremely modern. It was done for Frank Sinatra. So you have Paul Williams, Frank Sinatra, and then it was live on the Edward R. Murrow show. So you have three icons of American culture. The day Frank Sinatra moved in, they did a live shot with Frank Sinatra talking to Edward R. Murrow. And
his house?
Yeah, so the American public, this was in 1956, very unusual for an African-American architect to get that kind of national display. They didn't mention Paul Williams' name, which wouldn't have been unusual, because even if the architect had been white, they probably would not have mentioned his name. But Frank Sinatra is showing the live audience around the house, walking around the house, and it's just unbelievable with that kind of history and pedigree that this house is no longer standing.
I know, and it sounds like that a number of them have been lost.
Yes, that's true. The LA Conservancy, which is our preservation group, does its best, and I have nothing but admiration for them, and they have helped save some houses, but it's not easy, and sometimes they're torn down, in a sneaky way. Someone will buy it and pretend they're going to preserve it, and then it doesn't take much to tear down a house.
Oh, wow.
As far as
Betsy in the chat is asking, do you know if he preferred designing residential or commercial or both?
He absolutely loved doing homes.
Did he?
I'm just speculating. I may have heard his granddaughter say this, but that was his favorite thing. And she thinks maybe being, growing up an orphan, where he didn't feel, that he really had a home, even though he had a wonderful foster family. If he could have designed just homes, he might have. It was definitely, I think, his favorite thing.
So one of the things that I was reading about him is that he didn't design in any one style, but he was excellent at Spanish Revival, at Tudor, at every style, Georgian, every style that you could imagine. He could do really, really well. And so how did he decide what kind of house to make for a person?
It was the client who decided. and he was so focused on the clients. That's another hallmark of his career. He wasn't, some architects, especially after they become successful, Frank Lloyd Wright comes to mind.
Yeah, they have a look.
They will build the house and you'll live in it.
Yeah.
And they'll tell
you
you.
Don't like it.
Yeah, because you're getting a Frank Lloyd Wright house.
Right.
But he really worked with the clients. Whatever they wanted, he made happen, and he would sit down with them to talk about, how do you live? Do you entertain a lot? Do you need a suite for your mother-in-law? How many kids? What do you cook, or do you have someone who cooks for you?
That's lovely.
Everything. Yeah. Do you like being out in your yard? He was laser focused on the clients.
That is amazing. And I read somewhere, and this is sort of exactly what you were saying about what his daughter had said, or granddaughter, that he designed homes, not houses.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
A few minutes ago, Justin put up that beautiful John Green house in Flintridge.
Flintridge, yeah.
That's the one that's it's a Tudor style, isn't it?
It's absolutely a Tudor revival.
Beautiful.
And there's an interesting story about that house in Flintridge. When Paul Williams was a young boy, he was a newsie. One of his jobs, he was always had a job from the time he was 8, 9, 10 years old, and he was a newsie in downtown Los Angeles.
That means he sold newspapers.
Sorry,
that's so cute.
So one of his regular customers every day was then former Senator Frank Flint, who, when he left the Senate, came back to LA and became a developer. And he developed Flintridge in the 20s. And of course, Paul Williams knew about it. He was by then, a young architect, and he went to Frank Flint and he said, I'm that little boy who sold you newspapers on the corner, and I'm now an architect. And Frank Flint hired him to design his own home, and then scores and scores of homes in Flintridge. I'm building a big community now. Go after it. And so Flintridge, I would say, after Hancock Park and Beverly Hills, Flintridge, they say that they have the highest number of Paul Williams homes.
So Hancock Park is, for those of you who don't know, is a neighborhood right close to St. James.
Oh, absolutely.
Quite a few St. James folks who live there. How many Paul Williams houses would you say are in Hancock Park that are still standing?
I shouldn't say, but many. I think maybe 20 or more. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
I need to consult with Karen Hudson.
Yeah. I would love somebody to show me which are the Paul Williams houses in Hancock Park. That would be so
cool. Do it.
Jim Stewart is asking a question. Do you think that he was influenced by the 16th century Italian architect Paladin?
Yeah, the Paladin. Yeah, you know what? I think he was, and one of the things that I don't know that much about, but Karen Hudson, his granddaughter, and by the way, I don't think we would be talking about Paul Williams today if it weren't for Karen, because she started everything. After he died in 1980, he kind of faded from view, and she was the one who said, no, I'm not going to let my grandfather's memory die. And she did her first book, and then her second book, and she's done a children's book. So she is the expert. But one
Right.
of the things that she's told me is that he couldn't afford to do the grand tour of Europe like many architects, to see Italy and France and the United Kingdom. They're influenced by classical architecture, but he had these big books of architectural details that he would go through. I think Karen may still have them. So he learned it from books, from architectural books that literally they're huge books, and they have these details in them. And I would not be surprised if he were influenced by.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Sort of.
How do you pronounce it? I know there are Palladian windows, so.
I don't know how to pronounce Paladin. Someone will tell me. That's amazing. So in some ways, this little 4-year-old orphan just dreamed himself through this imagination of his and this incredible amount of hard work into this life where he could help other people create their dreams.
Right. Yeah.
Through residential design anyway.
Right. And he also opened the doors for other African-American architects and architects of color.
He must have hired many of them. Hey, we lost.
Yeah, no, my battery is low. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I have to
plug in.
All right, I have to get to a power. So, you know what? I may have to get a better cord.
Is this one unreliable?
No, it's too short.
Oh, I see.
All right, here it is.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well done.
We're back in business, I think.
Good.
How's that?
That's fantastic. Are you plugged
Sorry
in?
about that glitch.
No, this is the story of my life these days.
Yeah.
See, you've been a broadcaster for your whole career. I've only been a broadcaster for 3 months.
You do an excellent job.
Thank
You're
you.
a wonderful speaker. Everyone at James knows that.
Oh, well, I think I owe a lot to Justin because he's so talented. When it comes to the photographs, and Justin's been running them as we've spoken, we might want to just pull up that beautiful photo of the Zodiac pool, because that's so iconic, isn't it?
The Zodiac pool is, you can see how beautiful it is.
So beautiful.
It's become one of his most famous works, and this particular photograph is one of his most famous photographs. It was taken by Tim Street Porter, a very, very, very well-known architectural photographer who also specializes in residences, and has done a couple of books too. He's also a wonderful man, and he was very gracious to let us use several of his photographs in the film.
So this Zodiac pool is where?
The Zodiac pool is at the estate of Jay Paley. Jay Paley was the founder of CBS, and Paul Williams did an estate for him and in the 30s. And this
is it in Pasadena or is it in LA?
It's Beverly Hills.
Oh, it's in Beverly Hills.
We actually didn't go there, but the interesting thing is that until recently, I don't know who owns it now. It was owned by Baron Hilton, who is the grandfather of Paris Hilton. So, and I think he just died a couple of years ago. So that the house is still standing. I'm not sure
Hmm.
who does, if the family kept it or what. But fortunately, we have Tim Street Porter photographs.
That is
who
a
did
beautiful
gorgeous job of it.
That is so LA.
Yes, isn't it?
So,
And it was during the Depression.
I
So
know. That's
one of
amazing.
the things that people say was that Hollywood was turning out movies to keep the rest of the country the spirits up, and so they were making movies and making money, and some of Paul Williams' most glamorous houses and other buildings were built during the 30s, during the Depression.
So this would have been one of the few places in the United States where people could still afford this kind of
Right,
luxury,
right.
I guess.
Yeah.
Because of the studios. Yeah, that's amazing. But he also did. I think of this as a really important thing. He designed St. Jude's, that children's
Yes.
hospital.
Yeah, he did. I don't know how he met Danny Thomas, but they struck up a friendship, and they had a couple of things in common. They both came from impoverished backgrounds,
Right.
and became wildly successful, and they both wanted to give back. And
That spirit, yeah.
Danny Thomas had this dream of building a hospital for children. He wanted to build it in the South, and he wanted it to be open for children of all colors. And this was a revolutionary
And free.
Yes, and free. Yes, yes,
Amazing.
absolutely free. And
Amazing.
And I'm not sure of this, but I've heard that St. Jude was the first integrated hospital in the South.
Wow. Wow.
It is in Memphis, and it was, and that was, and Paul Williams gave him the design. He said, "I'll design it, and it's my gift to you."
Amazing. I find that so moving.
Yeah, it's a very touching story.
And I know that Paul Williams, although he wasn't an Episcopalian, he was a lifelong churchman.
Yes, that's true.
Very, very dedicated to First AME, right?
Right.
Beautiful building that he designed.
Yes, yeah, he was a very prominent member of the African American community. His church, he and his wife Della, they were just really ensconced in the community. And another thing his family did for the community, this was a joint venture of not just Paul Williams, but Karen and Paul's other grandfather, Dr. Hudson. They founded Broadway Federal Savings, and that was a time when African Americans couldn't get home loans at, I guess you'd call it mainstream banks, larger banks. And so that bank was founded to give home loans to African Americans.
What a game changer.
Yeah.
That's a really,
yeah. Both of them were actually, Dr. Hudson, Dr. Claude Hudson isn't as, well known, but he was a civil rights advocate and another mainstay of the community.
So Paul Revere Williams,
yes,
was the first. What is the organization of architects that he was the first Black member of?
The AIA. It's the American Institute of Architects.
Okay, the very and he was the first something else too. The first.
He had three distinguishing milestones with the AIA. The AIA is the American Institute of Architects, and it's the professional group of the largest professional group of architects in the country, possibly the world. He was the first African American member. He was the first African American fellow. That's another distinguishing milestone. Everyone is asked to be a fellow. You have to be nominated. People, other architects have to write letters, and then a committee chooses them. He was the first fellow, and then in 2017, he was the first African American to be awarded the gold medal, which is the highest
wonderful
level that an artist can achieve. Yes,
that was posthumous. Was
right. It was accepted by his family.
Oh, that's amazing. So you were saying something before we came on the air about how at the time of when he was sort of going strong with his career, there was a kind of attitude among architects that there was a sort of a snobby attitude about being the kind of architect who shifted styles, right?
Right. Especially what they call revivalist styles. There was a theory that architecture, especially after World War II, when modern architecture came into the forefront, and the theory then was that architecture should move only in one direction, that's forward, and that there was something fake or phony about these revival periods, that colonial should only be seen on the East Coast in true colonial buildings that were built in the 18th century.
Ones where you bang your head all the time.
Should only be in England in the 16th century, 17th century. Spanish architecture, California architecture, Spanish architecture should only be seen, in the missions along, the California.
And so
I remember Camino Real. Yeah, in other words, that everything should be true to its period, and you should never see any other forms of it. And that has fallen from favor. Revival architecture is now appreciated, but after when Paul Williams was having his greatest success, a lot of people looked down on the revival architecture, and it was very popular among the clients, and they wanted it. And Tudor revival was extremely popular in the 20s, not only in California, but all over the country. You see it in the East Coast too. And colonial revival and Spanish revival. And if the clients wanted it, he gave it to them. And but he was kind of looked down on by some architecture purists and historians and critics for that. But that's absolutely not true anymore.
I'm so glad that that he's getting, thanks to your film and thanks to the tireless efforts of his granddaughter,
right,
that he's getting the recognition, the full recognition that he deserves. So I'm wondering if you were to sort of sum up, what does he mean for us today, especially in this historical moment, another hinge in history, like the one when you were coming out of college, right? Another moment where there's a national reckoning on racism. What is his significance for us? as a country?
Well, I think that his significance is that he persevered. His frame of mind was the opposite of entitlement. He knew he had to make his own way, and he knew that no one else was going to do it for him. And he just persevered. And no matter how many slights, how many disappointments, how many obstacles were put in his way, he just kept going. And I think that's the lesson for anyone today. And also the lesson that achievement, and talent just have no color. That it's the power of the individual. So it would be interesting to see what Paul Williams would think of what was going on today. His grandchildren say he wouldn't be out marching, but he worked behind the scenes, quietly behind the scenes.
He integrated an entire field, right? I mean, he integrated architecture in America, it seems to me.
Well, I'll tell you, he was one of the most successful, and he is being recognized now as one of the greatest because of his story, because of what he did.
I read this beautiful quote from the pastor at the time at First AME, Pastor Cecil Murray, when he died at the funeral, and he said, Paul R. Williams not only designed buildings, he designed lives, he designed the future and dreams of tomorrow.
What a wonderful quote, and I've never heard it before, and I'm so happy that you took the time to look it up.
I'm obsessed with you and your work.
That's so impressive. Yeah, that is absolutely.
But what a legacy, right? What a legacy to be able to say that for all of his clients, rich and poor, black and white, residential and commercial, that he was helping people dream a new future.
You know what? He absolutely was. And I want to tell you that we did go to First AME, and they are living that idea in they have their outreach programs are incredible. They have programs for to help kids get into college, to help kids gain technical skills. So they are very much out there in the community, a very activist church like St. James.
One of the people on the chat right now, our intern, Christy Flake, is saying, I would love to see this film. Is it available online? And you knew we were going to ask that. So I know that you guys are doing some re-edits, but will it be available to stream?
Yeah, it was produced just for Black History Month. So, it did run in February. And we did want to make some revisions. We came across some new and better pictures. And then there were a few little misspellings and things that got by us. And so that's being worked on now. But the plan is for it to eventually be available for streaming. So it will happen. I'm not sure when, but there is a lot of demand.
I know.
And it will be seen again.
All right. So as soon as it's ready for streaming, let us know, and I'll put it in the church newsletter and make sure that everybody knows to go.
Wonderful.
To the PBS website so that they can see it. I got a secret look at it, and I just loved it. So, and I know some of our parishioners did see it in February when it screened as well. So, Royal, I am so grateful for this time tonight. I really am. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it. I always love talking about Paul Williams and LA and LA architecture. So
it's an amazing
you're
city.
so well informed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. And I'm glad that so many of you at St. James are getting to know Royal Rodgers as well, so that she's an 8 o'clocker. So some of you sleepyheads don't get to meet her.
Oh, yeah.
But when we do come back together.
Jonathan and I, my husband, love coming, and we can't wait until everyone is back in the church, and we'll have to come to that 10:30. I've seen pictures and it looks fabulous.
The music is out of this world. Yeah, but come anytime. It's always good when you're there. Thank you for tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And stay safe, and love to Jonathan, and to all of you. Thank you for being with me tonight on Conversations with Kate. Good night.
And you take care and be safe too.
I will. Bye, everyone.